My name is Joan Waltemath. I was born in Nebraska, but I've been living in New York since the late 70s. How would I describe myself as an artist? That's always a really hard question because from the inside it's complex, but basically I'm a painter. I work with traditional materials, but also very cutting-edge materials, and I make all my own paint, so that makes me like a certain kind of a painter. I was really excited to come back to Bemis this summer and work on my Treaty of 1868, a lament, is the title, project, which actually started here, my first Bemis residency in 2008. I came out with the idea of like doing something very open-ended, where I would go into a project working with my process of drawing on mathematical grids. But all I knew was I wanted to make some really large-scale paintings, so I got large-scale grids. And that was really exciting for me because I'd never done it before, worked before without basically seeing an image in my mind of the kind of thing I wanted to make. During that time, I was also, like I've been doing for many years, almost 20 years now, going to Inipi and Sundance and doing a lot of native ceremonies in the area. At the lodges, I would hear people sometimes talk about the Treaty of 1868. And so I went online and I looked it up and I realized, oh my God, this whole area had been given to the Lakota, the Arapaho, and the Cheyenne for as long as the wind blows and the grass grows in 1868 in this treaty that was signed at Fort Laramie in order to stop the Plains Indian Wars. As I was working on these drawings at Bemis, what emerged from the first set of work I did here was a set of diptychs. So there was two pieces. They were based on the same mathematical grid, but they were articulated in completely different ways with completely different qualities and affect. And I connected this to this realization I had about the two sides of the treaties and the way the descendants of the treaty signers and the other people who lived in this area regarded that treaty. And that sent me off on a long exploration that's basically lasted 10 years. So the work I was doing, the drawings, were actually plans to sew together some large sections of canvas. This is somewhere like a quilt, which has its own history in this area, but also after I made them, I realized, oh my God, these are really on the scale of a teepee. That became an important part of it. It took me 9 summers to sew these complicated mathematical patterns I figured out while I was at my first Bemis residency. As soon as they were done, I was ready to start painting on them. And it seemed to make a lot of sense to come back to Bemis, not only because, as you can see, there's the space here to accommodate the dimension of these paintings at 15 feet. It's true that I have certain themes, but I think that my focus on the treaty and the lament, how I felt when I discovered that my ancestors had homesteaded on the treaty land. They had also been responsible for the destruction of this beautiful native culture, which I came to know. And these things I felt like weren't only things that I thought about. I'm convinced that there's other people who grew up here who had questions about the legacy, the history, was to offer an occasion for people in the white culture, in the dominant culture, to come to terms with their own feelings about what has happened here. Why was it such a shock for me when I realized that my ancestors homesteaded on treaty land? Because I knew the history, but somehow I'd never connected the dots. As I dug into the documents, I realized there was never any intention of honoring those treaties. It was written about in historical records from the 19th century. It's just talked about as a way of clearing the lands for the settlers. And that's basically what happened. So I'd like to think that I could do something that would honor the people who came before my ancestors were here.